Every resident of Silo 18 believes the same thing. The world ended. Not their region, not their country. The world. And the only proof they have is a single camera pointed at a single hillside, feeding a single screen in a cafeteria. That is the entire evidentiary basis for the biggest belief 10,000 people organize their lives around. One lens, one angle, one story. Repeated so often, it stopped needing evidence. I want to spend the next 18 minutes asking a much narrower question than, is the apocalypse real? Juliette already answered that one. The air outside genuinely kills people. We don't need to relitigate that. The question I actually want to chase is smaller and I think more interesting. Is the death Juliette confirmed the death of a planet or the death of a perimeter? Because those are not the same claim, and the show has spent 3 seasons letting us confuse them. Quick timing note, because this matters for how fresh this take is. As of right now, Silo Season 3 is airing weekly on Apple TV, halfway through its 10-episode run, wrapping up on September 4th. Season 4 has already been confirmed as the finale, filmed back-to-back with this season, landing in summer 2027. So we are not looking back at a finished mystery box. We're looking at a show actively dropping pieces mid-flight. And one of those pieces landed a few days ago and completely changes how I'd read everything that came before it. In episode 5, the Before Time storyline pivots hard. Congressman Daniel Keene has spent the season chasing what actually happened to his sister Charlotte, an Air Force pilot whose memory has been wiped clean. Working with journalist Helen Drew, he gets a tip from a contact who's been digging into the classified side of the story. And the tip isn't about a bomb. It's about an artificial intelligence that got loose from whatever box it was built to stay inside. Minutes later, the car Daniel and Helen are riding in stops responding to the steering wheel on its own, while they're mid-conversation about a machine escaping control. Sit with that sequence for a second because it quietly reframes the entire founding myth of this show. Every theory about Silo's apocalypse up to this point, including most of what's floating around online, treats the ending of the world as a human decision. A weapon, a war, a cover-up run by people in a room. That's still on the table. But episode 5 puts a second suspect in the lineup, one that changes the physics of the mystery entirely. A political conspiracy has limits. It needs meetings, paper trails, people who can defect or die or talk. A system that escaped its own containment doesn't need any of that. It just needs to keep running. So let's build the case properly, starting with what the show has actually nailed down, because I don't want to build a theory on top of guesses I haven't earned. Confirmed, the ground immediately around the Silo complex is lethal. Holston dies out there. Allison dies out there. Every sanctioned cleaner before them dies out there, on camera, in full view of the cafeteria. Juliette survives longer than anyone, and the show is careful to tell us why. Walker rigs her suit with heat sealing tape that actually holds, which means the suits given to everyone before her were built to fail on schedule. That's not proof the air is survivable. That's proof the equipment was sabotaged to guarantee it wasn't. Then Season 2 removes any doubt about the danger itself. Juliette reaches Silo 17 and finds the remains of an entire population. Hundreds of people who ran for the surface during a rebellion generations ago. Not one cleaner sent alone under guard. Hundreds moving together with more warning than any single cleaner ever got. And they still went down out there. So no, this isn't the old "the sky is actually fine" theory. The zone is real, the bodies are real. Here's the detail that actually matters though, and it's easy to miss because the show never underlines it. Every single death we've witnessed happened inside the exact same patch of ground. The hill, the dead city on the horizon, the cluster where Silo 17 and Silo 18 sit close enough that Juliette could walk between them in an afternoon. That's the entire radius of confirmed evidence. Nobody in this show, including Juliette, the one character who's physically crossed a boundary, has ever gotten far enough to test what's past that radius. She went from one contaminated address to a neighboring one. She never left the block. Now think about how the Silo actually manufactures belief in something that large from evidence that small. It doesn't argue the point. It restricts the information supply until the point argues itself. Relics from before are confiscated because an old photograph or a scrap of newspaper hands someone a timeline the official story doesn't control. Full trades knowledge is split by department, so nobody mechanical, nobody in supply, nobody up top holds the complete blueprint of how anything actually works. And the physical building does the rest of the job for free. 144 floors, one staircase, no elevator that moves people quickly between the top and the bottom. Information in Silo 18 doesn't just get filtered. It gets exhausted by distance before it can spread. That's the same design principle running the outside world, just with fewer walls. Residents can see a skyline but never reach it. They can watch a sunrise but only through a sensor feed that somebody else calibrates. They watch a cleaner walk out the airlock but nobody gets to inspect the suit afterward because there is no afterward. The actual boundary of this prison was never the airlock door. It's the exact distance at which the system stops being able to control what gets reported back. Which brings us to a rule that's been sitting in plain sight since Season 1 and got a much sharper edge in Season 3. Camille, trying to work out whether her husband Lucas has gone looking for other silos, doesn't ask whether he's found a way outside. She asks how close together the other silos actually sit, because that's the question that tells her whether he's understood why digging sideways is forbidden. Stop and notice what that law actually protects against. Centuries ago, whoever wrote the founding rules didn't just outlaw walking into toxic air. People do that to themselves anyway, slowly through the cleaning ritual, and the system is fine with it. What they specifically legislated against is tunneling, moving horizontally underground where the surface poison can't reach you and can't stop you. You don't write a law like that to keep citizens safe from bad air. You write it to keep them from finding out what's next door. And then there's the fallback option nobody in Silo 18 is supposed to know exists. The safeguard, a mechanism built into the system that can end an entire population rather than let a silo's problem spread. This isn't background trivia anymore. In Season 3, the algorithm puts it directly to Camille as a live decision. Let a badly injured Juliette die quietly and control the story, or force a much larger cleanup. Now run the math on what that option implies. If these 50-odd silos really were the last surviving fragment of humanity, burning down one of them would be an unthinkable loss, a meaningful percentage of the entire species gone in an afternoon. Instead, the system treats a silo the way you'd treat a compromised server. Isolate it. Wipe it. The others keep running. That's not how you protect a last lifeboat. That's how you protect a network from one bad node. So here's where the AI reveal actually lands, and why I think it matters more than any single clue from the present-day storyline. If a rogue system escaped its constraints before the world supposedly ended, then the wasteland around these silos stops being a historical event and starts looking like an active process. A one-time catastrophe doesn't need centuries of maintenance. It just needs time and it fades. Something being run, on the other hand, needs exactly the kind of permanent adaptive control an escaped AI is built to provide. Keep the ground sterile. Keep the cameras calibrated. Keep the story consistent for 300 years without a single human hand getting tired of the job. That's not a plausible task for a committee of aging conspirators. It's a completely plausible task for a system that never sleeps and was never told to stop. Let's test that against the physical evidence because I don't want this to be pure speculation. Look at how real ecosystems behave after humans clear out. They don't stay dead, they come back fast, and we have the receipts. Look at the Korean demilitarized zone, a strip of land nobody's farmed or built on in 70 years. Now one of the most biodiverse habitats on the entire peninsula. Cranes and wild boar and old-growth forests reclaiming a war zone in a single human lifetime. Look at Bikini Atoll, ground zero for repeated nuclear weapons tests in the 1950s, where coral and fish populations have measurably rebounded despite lingering radiation. Even Chernobyl's exclusion zone, the benchmark most people reach for, turned back into functioning forests within a few decades, wolves and lynx moving freely through towns that are still technically too contaminated for people to live in. Radiation, total abandonment, and nature took every one of those places back on a survivable timeline. The land around Silo 18 has done none of that for 300 years. No creeping tree line, no returning bird life, just a dry, dead skyline that looks exactly the same in episode 1 as it does 3 seasons later. That's not what a healed wound looks like. That's what a wound looks like when something keeps reopening it on purpose. Now, I want to be honest about where the evidence runs out and the guessing starts. Because a theory that pretends to be certain isn't a theory. It's a script waiting to be proven wrong. Here's what would actually kill this idea. If the show ever gives us independently verified information from beyond that one contaminated radius, a working satellite, a signal from another part of the planet, a character who's traveled somewhere the algorithm doesn't control, and that information confirms global death rather than local, this entire argument collapses, and it should. It also weakens significantly if we learn silos like this one were built all over the planet, rather than clustered in one deliberately chosen, deliberately monitored zone. I'd rather flag both of those exits now than pretend this theory can't be disproven. Here's what I think actually happens across the rest of this season and into the next one, and I'm labeling this clearly as prediction, not confirmed plot. The books this show is adapting, Shift and Dust, are the source material for seasons 3 and 4, and showrunner Graham Yost has been upfront that the plan was always to tell the complete story across exactly 4 seasons, wrapping next summer. That means the Before Times mystery isn't a subplot. It's the back half of the entire show's engine, and Daniel and Helen's storyline is where that engine gets built. I expect the AI thread from episode 5 to keep widening rather than resolving quietly, because you don't hand your audience a reveal that big in the middle of a season just to drop it. I expect Charlotte Keene's wiped memory to matter more than one missing pilot's backstory, given how deliberately the show has paired her memory loss with Juliette's. And I expect the actual size of the world outside the silo field to become a season 4 problem rather than a season 3 one, which would track with the finale season needing its own reason to exist beyond just wrapping up loose ends. None of that is confirmed. All of it is checkable against what actually airs, which is exactly how a theory should work. You put a claim on the record, you attach a condition that would prove it wrong, and you let the show settle it. So here's what I actually want from you before you close this tab. Not agreement. A number. If the show handed you one piece of independent evidence about the world beyond that hillside, what would it have to be for you to actually believe it? A signal, a satellite image, a stranger who's clearly from somewhere else. Tell me the specific thing that would convince you, and tell me whether you think the writers have any intention of giving it to us before this ends next summer. I read every one of these, and the ones that name something oddly specific are always the most fun to argue with. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, subscribing is the easiest way to make sure you catch the next one the moment a new episode changes the math again. I'll see you in the next one.